It started with bodies. Along the quiet highways of Central Florida, police began finding men shot dead, stripped of their belongings, their cars abandoned miles away. One was found in the woods near Daytona, another inside a car deep in the scrublands. Each scene carried the same mark: a gunshot, close range, and no sign of struggle. Detectives thought it might be a robbery gone wrong. But soon, the pattern became impossible to ignore. The victims were all middle-aged men, killed along highways, and left in almost the same way. Florida's highways had turned into hunting grounds, and nobody knew who was behind it. A truck driver? A hitchhiker? Someone who knew how to vanish after every kill? Whoever it was, they were cold, calculated, and unstoppable. But when the truth finally came out, it stunned everyone. This ruthless killer wasn't a man at all. It was a drifter, a sex worker, someone society had always seen on the other end of violence. Welcome back to Prison Stories. In this video, we'll uncover how one woman turned the highways of Florida into her person-killing ground, and how investigators slowly pieced together the shocking truth behind those murders. This is the story of Aileen Wuornos. It began with bodies found along lonely stretches of road in Central Florida. Ordinary men who never made it home. One was Richard Mowry, a 51-year-old electronics store owner. Another was David Spears, age 43, a construction worker. Still another was Charles Dick Humphreys, 56 years old, a retired U.S. Air Force major and former police chief. Each had belonged to the world of everyday men, fathers, workers, and husbands. Over a little more than a year, they and others like them turned up dead, their cars abandoned, wallets gone, and their bodies dumped near woods and remote highways. At first, the crimes looked like robberies gone wrong, but detectives noticed a repeating signature. The victims had been shot at close range with a small-caliber pistol, a .22, and in several cases the bodies were found stripped or wrapped in blankets, suggesting the killer had tried to erase obvious links between scenes. The weapon and the similar close-range wounds became the thread detectives used to tie scenes together. Two practical clues pushed the investigation forward: abandoned vehicles and pawnshop trails. Several victims' cars turned up miles from where the bodies were found. Some of those cars were later seen in the possession of two women. Detectives also discovered victims' personal items showing up in local pawn shops, receipts and pawn records that pointed to a chain of transactions. Though small, paper traces began to narrow the search. A major break came with a damaged car crash. On July 4th, 1990, a witness saw two women abandoning a crashed car linked to one of the missing men. That witness gave police a description that made investigators focus on two women who had been seen with the victim's vehicle. Investigators then matched a fingerprint found on a pawn shop receipt to a print on the interior door handle of the abandoned car. That fingerprint matched a woman already in Florida police records, and the case shifted from anonymous killer to a traceable suspect. From those small clues, the .22 signature, abandoned cars, pawn shop receipts, and a witness who remembered two women at a crash, detectives' all directions led to two women. But who were they? And what did they have to do with the men turning up dead along Florida's highways? These women were Aileen Wuornos and Tyria Moore. Aileen Wuornos wasn't unknown to law enforcement. Aileen had a long history of arrests, theft, forgery, assault, even weapons charges. She drifted from town to town, surviving on sex work and the kindness or weakness of strangers. Tyria Moore was a hotel maid from Ohio, quiet and unassuming. She had met Aileen years earlier at a Daytona Beach bar, and the two became inseparable. They moved from motel to motel, surviving on Aileen's earnings and living a transient life along the highways. To police, Moore was more than a bystander. She was the missing half of the picture, the person who might know exactly who was doing the killing and why. A special task force was assembled, centered in Volusia County, Florida. They monitored the lives of these two women, the main woman and her companion. Investigators watched their motel stays, rental cars, and links to the victim vehicles. They also issued a media alert after the crash on July 4th, 1990, where witnesses described two women fleeing the scene of the car belonging to one of the missing victims. That public description aided officers in narrowing the field. On January 9, 1991, the main suspect was located at a biker bar named The Last Resort in Volusia County. She was found under an alias warrant, Lori Grody, and arrested without immediate disclosure that the murder inquiries were the motive. The arrest was carefully staged. Local law enforcement called off a direct attempt so the task force could move in and secure the site. They wanted to ensure any surveillance equipment, documentation, and potential movement from the suspect were properly monitored. The very next day, January 10th, 1991, the companion woman Tyria Moore was located in Pittston, Pennsylvania, staying with a family member. Once in custody, she was offered a deal, full cooperation in exchange for immunity from prosecution. She agreed to assist investigators by contacting the main suspect and eliciting incriminating statements. Police knew that every crime scene had been washed clean by time and weather. The murder weapon hadn't been found, and witnesses were scarce. All they had were fingerprints and a few stolen cars and pawn shop slips. Enough to raise eyebrows, but not enough for conviction. They needed a confession of Aileen, or the case was not strong enough to keep her behind bars. And there was only one person who could make that happen: Tyria Moore. Detectives reached out to Moore, who was also arrested. She was offered immunity in exchange for cooperation. Moore, scared and exhausted, agreed, but she insisted she wouldn't testify unless Aileen admitted everything first. So investigators devised a plan. They would record phone calls between the two women. Tyria would tell Aileen she feared being blamed for murders and beg her to clear her name. The goal wasn't just to get a confession. It was to make Aileen feel that she was protecting the only person she still cared about. For 3 days, Aileen sat behind bars in Volusia County while detectives played a careful game of patience. Each day, she received another call from Tyria, frightened, pleading, and emotional. On those calls, Aileen's voice shifted from calm to protective. At first, she denied everything, telling Tyria to stay quiet and wait it out. But eventually, she broke. She told Tyria not to worry, that she would take the blame. Moments later, she said the words investigators had been waiting for. "I did it. I killed them." On January 16, 1991, Aileen Wuornos walked into an interview room and gave a full confession. She admitted to killing 7 men, each, she claimed, in self-defense. She described in chilling detail how each encounter turned violent, how she pulled the trigger, and how she left their bodies on the side of the road. Her trial for the murder of Richard Mallory began in January 1992. Prosecutors focused on that case first, calling it the most clear-cut example of deliberate murder. The defense argued she had been sexually assaulted by Mallory and acted in self-defense. But prosecutors painted a different picture: a woman who robbed and killed men for money, using sex as bait. Their strongest blow came when the court allowed testimony from 5 other cases as evidence of her pattern, something rarely permitted but devastating to the defense. Throughout the trial, Aileen's mood swung sharply. One moment she appeared calm and composed. The next, she erupted in anger at witnesses or her own lawyers. When the jury heard her taped confession, her own voice calmly admitting the killings, the atmosphere shifted. The jury found Aileen Wuornos guilty of first-degree murder. Days later, the judge sentenced her to death by lethal injection. As the sentence was read, Aileen lost her cool. Her violent outbursts were heard in court. "I was raped. You're all killing a raped woman." Over the next few years, she would receive 6 more death sentences for the other murders. But even on death row, Aileen never stopped talking. Through interviews, outbursts, and later, a final message to the world. She gave contradictory statements, sometimes behaving like a victim, others admitting she was just returning society what was given to her. One day she would claim she killed in self-defense, and the next she would say she hated men and wanted them dead. Over the next decade, her lawyers filed multiple appeals. All were denied. Eventually, Aileen herself asked for the appeals to stop. She refused further legal help and insisted on facing execution. On October 9, 2002, Aileen Wuornos was executed by lethal injection at Florida State Prison. She was 46 years old. Her final words were bizarre and defiant. "I'll be back, like Independence Day with Jesus. I'll be back." Witnesses said she remained calm until the very end, staring straight ahead as the drugs entered her system. Aileen Wuornos' story remains one of the most haunting cases in American criminal history. A woman shaped by violence, who became violence herself. Her life blurred a line between victim and killer, forcing the world to confront a truth that still unsettles people today. Sometimes, monsters are not born, they're made. Thank you for watching Prison Stories. If you found this video interesting, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. We'll see you in the next one.